All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Christine Dykeman. I am a career coach and trainer. I'm passing on current information to you, the job seeker, so that you can land the job that you love. With that said, we are hosting David. David Schuchman is not only an active leader and an ally to job seekers all over the place, which is awesome because I love David. But he runs the professional services group of Mercer County, and he's an IT professional. He owns his own company, Princeton Technology Advisors, LLC. Today, he's going to speak about how to work as a consultant in the gig economy. He's going to help answer all your questions. Please put your questions in the chat box with a Q in front of them, and I will monitor the chat box and relay the question to David. That way we're not talking over one another. All right, David, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It is certainly a pleasure to be here and to be back. Give me a second just to quickly share my screen. Come on, there we go. Get that going. There we go. So you should be seeing my screen, the full screen right now. And so like Christine said, please, if you've got any questions along the way, do put them in the chat, and Christine will just politely stop me and we will address your question at that time. And it may be possible as your question comes up, if I know the information is in an upcoming slide, I'll mention that as such, but if your question is relevant to any point coming up right now, then I'll address it right then and there. And good. And this is a little bit of my story. I was in corporate IT for about 30 years, had been laid off twice. And then after the second time of being laid off, I started doing my own, started my own business. And people began to ask me, how did you do it? How did you come about doing it? So it became a presentation. And so that's why we're here today. And so let's just talk about a couple of things. I'll call them program caveats or just things to know about. For one thing, I am not an attorney. I am not an insurance professional. We are going to be doing this. We are friends talking to friends. And that's really all we're talking about. So I will be giving you my observations, my experience, what I've heard from the attorneys or insurance or tax professionals that I've talked to. But ultimately, you may need to talk to your own insurance or tax professional or attorney about your own situation. And if you do have a question and ask me about something specific to your situation, I may defer that and say, I'm not the professional you need to talk to specifically. I'm really talking as a friend talking to a friend. So just be aware that's the perspective of this program. And so as Christine mentioned, I thought I had muted this, but I am an IT professional. I now have my own company. It is called Princeton Technology Advisors, where I understand we will be getting 4 to 35 inches of snow this week. So that's fine. We do a bunch of different types of things for our small business and not-for-profit clients, including website updates, technology managed services, which is like virus protection and tech support for servers and stuff, and managing their IT projects. A lot of times small businesses don't have their own IT manager, and I get called in for short assignments and such. And as she mentioned, I'm also active in the job seeker support community because we are a community of individuals looking for jobs. And so I do lead PSG of Mercer County. You're most welcome if you are not yet visiting us. Every Friday morning at 10 o'clock, just visit our website, psgofmercercounty.org, psgofmercercounty.org, and we have the connection information for that week's meeting in our event calendar. And we're going to be talking about employment law from an employment law attorney this week. So that's Friday morning, 10 o'clock, psgofmercercounty.org. And I'm active with
Glad to be there, David. I think Hennon is awesome. I've had him as a guest speaker, and honestly, you have the most wonderful guest speakers at PSG, and I definitely recommend that everyone mark your calendar and plan to attend this Friday and every Friday, because it's really a great group and lots of great information.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. Yeah, Hannon is a terrific person and a helper and a giver. And there's no need to sign up or register in advance. You just show up before 10 o'clock. Okay, so let's get into the program and let's talk about what is the gig economy. And we've kind of heard that term before, either from other people, maybe in social media and the news, but it's really companies are now hiring contractors more, independent consultants more for a specific project. And that specific project is the gig. And they're doing it for a number of reasons that we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. And so the gig workers, we are those independent contractors, the contracting firm employees. So if you are hired by a contracting firm, then you're actually a full-time employee for the contracting firm working on the gig. Sometimes the companies are hiring part-timers or flex or temp people and working on those gigs. So we can be gig workers. And for a lot of us, it's going to be the future of work. This is the way we're going to work for a part or the rest of our career. In my case, I've made the decision that that's the way I want to work for the rest of my career. And we will be talking about consulting mostly from the perspective of being independent and being your own business person. The reason why is that's where most people have the most questions. Of course, if you decide to be employed by a consulting company and they place you on a contract, you're a full-time employee and you'll get your W-2 and all that. A lot of what we'll talk about today does apply to that, but we're going to talk more about what it's like to be a bit independent. But what is a consultant? Basically, you're someone who provides skills or some level of expertise to other people, and you do so professionally. You're getting paid for that. And that's simply what the consultant is. You're really someone, you tend to work on a fixed contract, and there's really no difference between being called a contractor or a consultant, but you're working on a specific contract for a specific project. And so kind of the bottom line is you're kind of a hitman. And here in New Jersey, these are the most famous hitmen they are. They go in, they do a job, and then they go out. And so that's kind of what we do as consultants or contractors, working on those gigs. Now, there are certain differences between working as an employee and working as a consultant, and this slide will highlight a few of them. And there's certainly going to be many more. If you've got specific questions, you can certainly ask about those. But more typically as an employee, you expect as part of your compensation to receive benefits. You might get health insurance or dental insurance or paid vacation and the like. Typically as a consultant, there are no paid benefits. In other words, the company isn't paying you for those things. Those are things that you have to pay for on your own. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you're out of work and you're not working as an employee and you're not working as a consultant and you need healthcare, you may be paying for it out of your pocket. At least working as a consultant, you're getting paid. You know, there's something called FICA. It's basically your employment taxes separate from the state and federal. And this is a federal tax called FICA that basically covers Social Security and Medicare. And typically as an employee, your employer pays half of it. You will have a line item on your paycheck that says FICA or the like, and that's really half the tax. As an independent, you pay the full 15.3%. But as an employee, you're probably paying half of that at 7.65. Typically, as an employee, you're paid by a paycheck, and at the end of the year, your employer sends you a W-2. If you are employed by an independent consulting firm, you may be hired as a consultant, as a subcontractor, or you may be hired as an employee. So if you're hired as an employee to a contracting company, you're also paid by check and receive a W-2 at the end of the year. But as an independent consultant or as a subcontractor, you're paid on based on your invoice that you submit or whatever their process is. I tend to submit invoices to my clients, and you will be given what's called a 1099. You've probably gotten those anyway from other financial institutions. But if you earn over $600, they will send you a 1099 for the amount that you've earned and reporting that to the government. Typically, as an employee, your income and payroll taxes are paid out of your paycheck. And you've probably seen the big amount on the top line and a lot of little deductions, and then the smaller amount on the bottom line. And some people get upset by that. Don't get upset by that, because they've taken care of your income tax for you, at least the amount you're required to contribute. When you're an independent consultant, when you're paid on a 1099, I should say, as a consultant, you need to file your income taxes quarterly. You do so to both the state and to federal. And if you are dialing in or connecting to us from a state outside of New Jersey, it's up to what your state requirements are. Typically quarterly is what I've seen. As an employee, you have limited employment tax deductions. There used to be a lot more available to employees. Maybe some of your travel that you would have done, not necessarily commuting, some of your expenses, if you had to buy something for your home office, and so forth, those were often tax deductions. A lot of those tax deductions have gone away. You will need to speak to your own accountant about your own situation. But as an independent, all of your business expenses are tax deductions, or I should say almost all of them are. I don't want to say all of them. So as example, I'm sitting in front of you right now. I've got a desktop computer at my knees. I'm looking at a monitor. I've got a camera in front of me. I've got my desk and home office. All these have been tax deductions during the year. So whatever money that I've made, these are professional expenses. Matter of fact, in 2021, I did buy a new desktop computer. So that will come off my 2021 income, and I'll be taxed at the lower amount.
Let me ask you, David. I've seen job ads that are out there, and some of them say consultant for XYZ consulting firm, and some of them just say contract to hire consultant. So how do they differ? You're still called a consultant. So is there a difference that you're working temporary part-time with taxes and all of that you just explained?
So again, it depends on how they're paying you, but a contract to hire or consulting to hire, typically you are not an employee of the company where you're doing the work, but it all depends on how you became engaged. If you are hired by the ABC consulting company, you're a full-time employee. The opportunity with the end client may be that at some point they will hire you. But if it's the case that you are a consultant or contractor paid on a 1099, then my understanding would be you are paying your taxes quarterly, and you have the opportunity for the deductions. And then at some point, if they say, we just can't do without you, we're going to hire you as a full-time employee, you switch. So you will need to speak with your own accountant about what the actual treatment will be for you. But my understanding is, for as long as you're an independent contractor on a 1099, tax-wise, you're treated that way. And if the second half of the year you're an employee, then for the second half, you're treated that way, tax-wise.
Thank you.
Yep, but again, speak to your own accountant or business tax advisor. And every once in a while at the bottom of the slide, you'll see where I'll say, speak to your professional, your appropriate professional. Because remember, I'm just a friend talking to a friend. Or a friend talking to lots of friends today.
Lots of friends. Thank you.
Yep. There we go. So what's in it for the client? Why might the client want to bring you in as a contractor or a consultant rather than hire you as a full-time employee? Well, for one thing, it's easier to hire and fire or terminate the person. A lot of times they have to go through HR and the legal department, go through senior management in order to get all the approvals. But typically, and that's for a hire, but typically for a contract, they get the contract approved. They know there's people that are going to be involved. And so the hiring people just go ahead and bring those people on board. There tends not to be a lot of administrative responsibility. When the contract is over, they'll say, thank you very much. Contract is over. We'll be asking you to leave at the end of the contract in 2 weeks or whatever. And then that's it. Yep. It tends not to be a long-term commitment. And of course, if you are here and you're currently unemployed, you could say there wasn't a long-term commitment the last time. But it's implied at the very least. We tend to have a hope or expectation when we're employed that will be there for a long time. But generally with a project, you know, it's going to be a 6, 9, 12-month project, whatever it's going to be, and you just know ahead of time. And for the company, they get to manage their expense based on the project length. Typically, they are looking for and receive a much more objective and seasoned team member. This is very common when hiring for a contractor as opposed to hiring for a consultant. A lot of times what happens is they're hiring rather hiring as a contractor as opposed to an employee. The reason why a lot of times when they hire for employees, they even think about, gee, I'll train you on the things you don't know. I just want to know that I can work with this person for 8 hours a day. So they're looking for nice people or whatever they like. But for consultants, they're really looking for the expertise. They're looking for the skills that the employee team doesn't have. That's what they're paying for. But a lot of times when they hire employees, they're looking for people that they'll be happy to work with for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and they'll train them on the couple things that may be missing. So there is a little bit of a different mindset. You really kind of need to hit the ground running when you come in consulting.
I love that. That's a very important point. Two different perspectives on who they're going to hire and extend an offer to, whether you are part of that team or a consultant. I love that.
Yep, thank you. And ultimately, it does save them money because it is a fixed term. So they don't have the expectation that they're going to be hiring you for a longer term. They're not paying for the benefits. They're not paying for your training. A lot of people will complain they're not paying for training anymore anyway. They're not paying for your personal time off. And I can tell you when I worked in IT, even when I was on vacation, I was working anyway. But yeah, they're not paying for you out of the office and all those other things that are kind of benefits. Now, you tend to have a little bit higher rate on an hourly basis. We'll be talking about rates a little bit later. So you make up a good part of that anyway, but at least it tends to be much more manageable costs for them, the client.
David, we do have 2 questions in the chat box, and I don't know if you will address them. On the last slide, you talked about the differences and the taxes that an employer pays versus a consultant and that kind of thing. What about unemployment insurance? How does that work?
My understanding is
that,
yeah, my understanding is that I would talk to someone like you, Christine, to find out more about that.
No, don't talk to me.
My understanding is if you are an independent or have your own company and you are paying into the unemployment insurance pool, then you do have an opportunity when your employee is off contract, and you could be the employee for your company, to collect unemployment insurance. But specifically, you'll need to speak with someone at the appropriate state office to get the details about that. It is also possible that an employment law attorney may know that as well. I don't have the specific information.
Let me ask you this, again, in the chat box, what if you're working full-time as an employee and part-time as a consultant, like on the side, picking up income, developing your expertise kind of thing? How does that work? Is there a problem with something like that? It seems it's a concern for the standard W-2 employers.
Years ago, when I was early in my career, as a programmer, worked for a bank, worked there for years, but I had a side job. And all I did was I let my boss know, I've got this side job. Is that going to be a problem? And so I think you do need to talk with one or both of the employer companies to find out if either one of them are going to have a problem, if it's a conflict. From a tax perspective, it's not a conflict. So if you are making earned income, employed income, and paying your taxes through your employer, through the W-2, that's fine. And if you're earning a few dollars on the side, it's taxable, and you would be responsible to pay that on your own.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, some good questions. And good, looks like we are through the questions for now. So we talked about what's in it for them, but what may be in it for you? Why might you be interested in being a consultant? For one thing, it will fill a resume gap. Unfortunately, there's a lot of discrimination, well, throughout the world, throughout the country, but in the hiring world, there is discrimination when people have been unemployed for a long period of time. There's a silly mindset of, well, if someone hasn't hired David just yet, I'm not going to hire him either. So when you work as a contractor, you put that on your resume. And you can decide that you want to put it as an independent contractor, or you work for a contracting company, or the company that ultimately placed you, the project. You have to figure out what makes sense on your resume, but it will help mitigate any unemployment bias that some recruiters have. You know, you usually get paid more on an hourly basis than the employees. So on the other hand, you may have gaps between projects, and or you may have expenses that you're responsible for. But you usually get paid more. So while you're doing the contracting, you could earn a little bit higher income. Also, you do have a current position on your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn has something called a 100% complete profile, or an all-star status. And one of the things that they have as a requirement to be 100% complete is that you have a current position. A current position is one that does not have an end date, or it has a start date and the end date says to present, that kind of thing. It shows that you're still employed. So put on your LinkedIn profile that you're a consultant. You can work for your own consulting company. And we're going to talk about companies in a few minutes. And it's just always to present. And so you can help have 100% profile. Why do you want 100% profile? Because when someone is recruiting and looking for people like you, a whole bunch of people could be coming up in that list. And while LinkedIn doesn't officially publish their specs for the search engine, they have their own search engine algorithm. It's known that the 100% complete profile come above the people that are not the 100%. So you want to improve that ability to be 100% complete profile.
I agree with you, David, on that point. That is so important. And extending a job that you might have left 6 months ago, 8 months ago, for whatever reason, and saying to present is kind of a fib. Whereas the current position, if you give an advice, even one time in those 8 months or a year and a half or whatever, you are technically a consultant, even if you're not getting paid. So that will increase your LinkedIn to that 100% all-star rating.
Yep. And if anyone ever asks, well, why are you job hunting if you're a consultant? And you can answer the question, you know, I've got this consulting business so I can find consulting gigs, but I am really looking for full-time employment with a firm like yours.
Perfect.
And you can craft it according to the situation that you have there, but it's not an unexplainable situation. So don't worry about that. Also, you have the opportunity to develop a wider variety of experience to put on your resume. You know, there are certain companies and industries that only hire people within the company or the industry. Pharmaceutical is one that's known to be like that, medical devices, some of the financial services sectors. And you may say, I'd really like to get into pharmaceutical, and they're not going to hire you if you don't have a pharmaceutical background. But the mindset is a little bit different when you're an independent consultant, because they're hiring you for your core job or technical experience. And a lot of times they will consider bringing you in as a consultant, even if you don't have industry experience, but you have experience on the project that they have in front of them. And then you can put on your resume that you've worked in that industry. Companies are also more willing to contract for older staff while they hire for younger staff. So, you know, is there age discrimination? Yeah, I believe that there is. I think it is very obvious. Lots of different people that do public presentations talk about it, and there are reasons why. There are ways to mitigate that. I'm sure there have been programs here at the Workforce Center that have talked about it. But there are recruiters and companies that are not willing to hire older staff, especially older staff they don't know. One reason why is older staff are more expensive. Now, you're not more expensive because you want a larger salary. The reason why is whatever the posted salary is the posted salary. But other things like the cost of back-end benefits go up more when the average age of the employees, of all the employees, is higher. So that they know that if their insurance costs go up, their life insurance, health insurance premiums, dental premiums go up, because as the staff get older, on average, they may need more of those services, and the insurance actuaries make sure that they get paid for that. And some people say, you know, I'm only interested in a contract position if it's going to be a contract to hire. And I get that, because for a lot of people, their end goal is to become a full-time employee. But a lot of times, the company hasn't figured out that they want to hire you until you've worked there as a contractor for a few months. they will just say, we just can't do without you. And I actually had that situation a number of years ago. In the early 2000s, we had a project going. I brought on 2 consultants, excuse me, to augment the team. The project lasted 13 months. And when the project was over, I spoke to my boss, the chief information officer, and I lobbied to keep one of the 2 consultants who was just really spectacular. And even though years later in 2012, I left the company, that fellow, Ray, good friend of mine now, he was with the company until 2019. So he stayed there. He was just a good employee. It was never my intention to hire someone until I made a case for, we need him. So be open to contract and consulting positions, because it may turn into a contract to hire once you're there. So I've hopefully given you some reasons to consider being a consultant, but there's still a few of you that are there saying, no, maybe I don't want to be a consultant. And I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why you may be saying that, or why some people may be saying why they don't want to be a consultant. For one thing, consultants are not treated as well as employees. By the way, that's not a fact. That's what some people say. I don't necessarily agree with that. But some people think they're not treated as well as the other employees. And there are some things as a consultant or a contractor that you may not be entitled to. For instance, if they have a company picnic, or if they have company corporate meetings and things, you may be excluded from things like that. On the other hand, you may actually be treated better day-to-day in the office. One of my first assignments was actually a 3-day contract in suburban Chicago. The company flew me out. I got the ticket on a Friday to fly out on a Monday, so they were expensive tickets, but they paid for them. It was only 3 days to be at the office outside of Chicago, and so they covered all of my travel expenses. But not only that, when I arrived, I met the IT director, and he put me in a very nice office right next to him. I had my very nice office. I was not in a pit with other consultants. They did have other consultants there. And then I was told what the people I needed to talk with, and I went to the finance department to talk to the first person I needed to talk to, a very nice lady. And I said, oh, we'll be meeting in my office to talk about this stuff. And she lashed into me. You know how long I've been at this company? I've been eyeing that office that you're in for months, and you just walk in and take it. So I had the better office than her. I was treated better than she was. She was not happy. Not too bad for her. You might be unhappy. You just say, I'll be much happier as an employee. I might be unhappy as a consultant. Well, if that's the case, you'll move on. The contract will last 6, 9, 12, 24 months, whatever it is, and then you'll move on. And the joke's on them. They paid you to be unhappy. On the other hand, you can also be employed by a company and be unhappy. In 1999, I was hired by a company. I had a lot of enthusiasm, and I got there, and I was looking forward to it. Very quickly, I became unhappy. 4 months later, I left. I went to another company. So just because you're an employee doesn't make you happy. So you can always move on. There are some unpaid administrative tasks. For instance, you may be required to fill out extra timesheets, submit invoices, and things like that. Maybe there are work reports you have to do to justify or support the work that you completed as a consultant. You may or may not be getting paid for some of those. And of course, there's the time to look for work. But you know what? You generally command larger hourly rates. So you make up for some of the unpaid time. So as you come up with your hourly rate, whatever you think you should be paid, build in a little bit extra dollars per hour to cover some of the time that you need to put in when you're not working hands-on on the project. But I need benefits. As a consultant, I may not get benefits. You're right. As a consultant, you may not get benefits. If you work for an independent consulting company as an employee, they may offer them to you. And we're going to talk about later where to find and how to buy benefits. But if you need benefits, yeah, you're going to pay for them out of pocket. So if you don't want to be a consultant, that's one thing you're going to have to do is pay for them out of pocket as a consultant. On the other hand, you can buy the benefits because you're being paid. So if you're sitting at home waiting for that full-time opportunity, you're paying for the benefits out of pocket. But now, as a consultant, you're paying for it out of the income that you're receiving on your contract. So you are actually having paid benefits. So we really don't think of it that way. It may only be short-term. I'm looking for a longer-term opportunity. I'm hoping to work forever. Great, I understand. You may be on a 6-month contract, but you want to work for the rest of your career till you're ready to retire. You are on this call right now because that's a fallacy. You are not necessarily going to be hired until you are ready to leave your company. And think of this, if you're in a 6-month contract and you are earning $50 an hour, that's about $50,000. Now, that means a 12-month contract is $100,000. What would you do with $100,000 this year? So don't think about this as only short term. It is a lot of income coming in. And by the way, for most professionals in the Northeast, $50 an hour is a low rate. I just used simple math right there. And again, we'll be talking about rates in just a little bit. So there is our first intermission. So if any of you have not yet asked a question and you were thinking maybe you want to, this may be a good opportunity to do so.
I just established an LLC, somebody said, and this is very timely. So awesome. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, I see that Hope established an LLC. Yeah, we'll talk more about LLCs and corps in just a moment.
See, a lot of should I work full-time and consult, and they telling the current employer that I have another job. We have we answered some of that.
Okay.
And we have some LinkedIn requests and connections in the chat, so definitely take a look so you can meet new job search buddies, new friends, and definitely share information and share networking events that might help them. Will you talk about compensation as to how to figure out what your fair pay is?
Yes, so that is coming up in just a few slides. So why don't we just wait? But if at the end of those slides, I didn't answer your specific question, we'll address that in more detail.
All right. And the last one I have here is how much flexibility do you have with the consulting firm if the assignment isn't working out as originally discussed?
Typically you leave. I was in that company employed for 4 months and I left.
Do you give 2 weeks notice? Does it work the same as being a regular employee? How does that work?
So often you do have a written contract between you and the organization that you're hiring, that's hiring you. If they're hiring you as an employee, then it's typically considered similar to whatever at-will employment is, the rules in the state, or if you have a sign-on contract at that time. If you're engaged in it as an independent contractor, you should have a contract that says, how much you're being paid, how many hours you're going to work, all that kind of stuff. Do have an out clause that protects you. And if you want to say 2 weeks notice, or, that's fine. So, yep, but you do have the ability.
That's a new term. So many people on this call might not know about what an out clause is. Can they get more information from your website, or is that a slide that you're going to go through? How would they find out more information?
At that point, when you're putting a contract together, I've got specific information, speak to an attorney. I cannot give you more information.
That's fine.
I'm not an attorney. I play one on TV, but that's about it.
Is there a place to look for consulting opportunities, like a best place or best practices, or just any job board? Like, where would you go?
Yeah, so we're actually going to address that also in a few minutes, but typically there are job boards that are there, and I've got some links to them. And by the way, later when you download these slides, the links that are in them are live and active, so you can download the slides and click on the link. Yep.
All right. And if you're a newbie, how do you establish yourself as a subject matter expert that is available for consulting and knows what they need to know? How do you make that happen and have people interpret it that way?
So yeah, it's funny. I'm reading this word for word, consulting newbie. How do you gain the experience to be an expert? You have to work in the field. So that's how you do that. Now, how do you promote yourself as an expert is different. That's the information that's going to be posted in social media, on your website, when you're going to meetup groups and stuff like that, which we'll be talking about also in a bit more minute. And our subcontracting with other consultants, yes, you can do that. I've hired subcontractors. I don't hire employees, but I've hired some contractors. And actually, related to an earlier question, some people use the term contractor and consultant interchangeably? Yes, they're interchangeable. So whether you're a subcontractor or a subconsultant, I'm sure that's the same thing. What about starting at a smaller firm versus a larger firm like Accenture, Deloitte? Seems like big companies won't consider you if you haven't been a consultant before. So that's a hiring practice, right? If they're not going to hire you because you haven't been a consultant before, then be a consultant. I don't know what their hiring practices are. There are a lot of discriminations in the hiring marketplace. They may not want to hire you because of your age, you're too young or too old. They may not want to hire you because you're currently unemployed. You may not hire you because you're not in a certain industry. You have to work past that through other means. For instance, maybe you work at a smaller company first, or you work as an independent consultant, or maybe you know somebody at Deloitte and reach out to them directly and say, hey, I've decided to make a career change working as a consultant and taking my expertise to work with you, and reaching out and working with someone directly. So that may be a helpful way through that as well.
So for contract jobs, consulting jobs, gig jobs, it sounds as though networking is the same for that as they would be for employment permanent opportunities. Networking.
Yeah, I think it is. Who you network with may be a little bit different, but in the most case, unless you are well known, very well known, sitting at home and waiting for the phone call is not going to happen. Whether you're looking for full-time work or whether you're looking to be a full-time employed work or looking to be a consultant, you do have to go out and meet people. And among the things that I did was I went to business groups and meetup groups to meet people. We'll be talking more about that a little bit later. But you can do the same thing for full-time employment. If you are someone who is an accountant and you work in the pharmaceutical industry, go to a pharmaceutical meetup group or go to an accounting meetup group to meet people. Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, so I think that's it for the questions. Let's see. And then, yep, Valerie says you could definitely network your way into a large consulting firm. Absolutely. Yep. All right, so let us move along, and this intermission curtain opens. I'm old enough to actually remember having been to a movie that had an intermission. I think The Godfather Part 2 had an intermission. So do I need my own company? And this is kind of the part of the program where people start diligently taking notes. And again, this is being recorded, so Christine is making this available to you. So if there's anything you do miss, it'll be available. My slides are available to you. I'll give you the link a little later. So if you miss something, or otherwise just ask a question in chat. Do I need my own company? No, you don't need your own company. Now, sometimes companies that are hiring prefer that, but it's not a legal obligation. So what if my client does require that I work through a corp? And so working through a corp happens a couple of ways. Find someone that you know who has a company and ask them to hire you. So they will hire you, and then your friend's company or your colleague's company will actually sign the contract with your end client. And typically the reason why companies want you to work through a corporation is New Jersey has some very strong laws to protect employees. And it ensures that you're treated fairly, treated properly. And it also ensures that the state is collecting income tax timely from the employer. When employers contract for people who are independents and not through a company, then sometimes there's a gray area as to should they really be classified as an employee or a consultant. And if the company has misclassified you, there may be fines that they have to pay, plus the back taxes and such. But if they hire you through a consulting firm, then your consulting firm is responsible for that, and it's easier for the hiring client. So that's why they prefer corps.
I think that's a great point, David, because yes, a company would rather do business with another company than an individual. So if you have some kind of company set up for you to do that consulting contract gig work, it makes it so much easier for them to just move forward and hire you as that consultant than to go through a lot more red tape to expedite the contract to you.
Yeah. And depending on how strict the company, your client company is, they may not even consider you without the corp. So you may want to work with a friend. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is what you can do is you can go find a consulting company. So go find someone at Deloitte and say, hey, I've got this client. They're looking to hire me as a consultant. Will you represent me? Or Robert Half or Adecco or any of those other companies. And they will be happy to, because it's likely, they're going to get a piece of the action. They'll get a percentage of the rate. And they now have a relationship with a client that they didn't have before. So they will consider doing that as well. I'm actually not a fan of this being the best or first thing to do, because those companies typically have a reputation for taking a very large percentage of the hourly rate. 50% or even a little higher is not unusual. If that does happen, that you want to speak with one of these companies, negotiate the rate with them. And the reason why is I think they're entitled to the higher rate when they're doing the recruiting and going through a big effort. But when you're bringing the job to them, they didn't have as much skin in the game. So you may want to negotiate with them. But in general, I don't think this is necessarily the best option, but it is an option that you can use.
What you were just referring to, does that mean what David has said in chat? I'm sorry, Donald. Does it, we've seen ads that say no corp to corp. Does that mean the same thing as what you were just saying?
Kind of. What it basically means is the consulting firm that you're looking to hire you for the gig, they don't want to hire you as a subcontractor, but they will be willing to hire you as a W-2 employee.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
I hope that clarifies.
Not really sure what the preference is. I'm the opposite. I'm not interested in having the paperwork and having employees, but I've worked with subcontractors. That's my preference.
Okay.
Yep. I like this as an option. Engage with a split placement company. And you may not have heard this term before. And I've worked with Top Echelon. I found NPA Worldwide as I was researching on this program. I don't know them very well. What a split placement company basically is a professional employer. They're kind of like a consulting company, but they're not doing any recruiting. All they do is they are waiting for their contractor clients to bring them clients. And so what will happen is you contact Top Echelon and you say, I've got a client who's willing to bring me on as an employee, as a contractor, but I need someone as an employer to represent me. And that's what Top Echelon does. They tend to take a much smaller percentage of the rate than a consulting company will. Now, you will be obligated to pay your income tax through them. You will pay a $1 per hour rate to them, but it tends to be a whole lot less than a consulting company. And the flip side is you're hired as a W-2. You don't have any of the administrative time and effort that you're going to have to put in for your own company and filing quarterly taxes and all that. So for a lot of independents or people that are doing occasional gigs, they like this option a lot better than having their own LLC or company. So Top Echelon is a company I worked with a number of years ago when I was a hiring manager for IT. And if I was hiring consultants who they themselves did not have an LLC or corp to work with, I reached out to my contact at Top Echelon and put them in touch with each other. And they did the paperwork in a couple of days and took care of all that. So if you don't have your own corp, but your client requires it, this is also a good option. And another good option is form your own corp or your own LLC. It doesn't take very long. We'll talk a little more about that in a moment. For most independent professionals or even in partnerships, LLCs are sufficient. And it means limited liability corp. We'll talk about what that means in a moment. And you're also going to make sure on the federal level, you get what's called an EIN, employer, not employee, employer identification number. It's basically the social security number for the company. And you file for that as well. So you can go to the New Jersey State Treasury website if you're in New Jersey, or whatever state you're in. All states now have LLCs and the ability to form independent companies. You
can do it right online for free. You don't have to pay for it. you could go to an insurance broker, pay them a very small fee, and they can do it for you, but it's really just filing a piece of paper like David said.
There are filing fees, so it's not free in New Jersey. But the effort to do it, of course, if you do it on your own, you won't be paying. But yeah, you can use independent companies or attorneys. I used a company called LegalZoom, and they're just a company that does legal filings for you. And
Write
so
that down, everyone. LegalZoom.
So yeah, there's another called the company corporation. There's a few companies out there, or you could speak to your own attorney, your own business law attorney, who will help you file that. But you can
Someone
file
said
it.
Rocket Lawyer. Have you heard of that one?
I have not heard of that one. Oh, okay.
All right, they
Yeah,
put it in
and-
the chat. So
And if you are looking for a business law attorney, I can recommend the gentleman that I know and worked with. So it's just a personal referral, not, anyway, it's up to you. And here are some common forms of business entities. Now, please read the notes at the bottom. This is going to be a very oversimplified summary of several complex sets of laws and regulations. Why did I read it out loud? Because I want it on the recording so people know that I'm letting you know this is not the be-all, end-all for the types of companies. There are many more types of companies that are out there, but some summary differences among them. But you should speak with your own tax professional and business law attorney to learn how any of these are appropriate in your own situation. But the very first one is called the sole proprietor. It's actually not a business entity per se. You're not filing anything with the state, at least not the state of New Jersey. And so you're not a legal entity. But you are allowed to work as an independent. You don't file anything. You don't have any organizational documents. Now, if you ever did some sort of accident in the workplace and there was some liability, for instance, maybe you broke something in the office or you did some sort of filing that cost them some kind of money and they want reimbursed from you, your liability is personally and professionally unlimited unless you have insurance, which we'll talk about in a few slides. So if you don't have the insurance and you owe them, $1 million and they want to take your house, you may have to sell your house. So just
are any of these that are on your slide, are they recurring fees at all? Like yearly fee to maintain an LLC or a C Corp? How does that?
So it's in an upcoming slide. Sole proprietor, sole proprietor has no fee because you didn't really form anything. You just put on your resume or on your business card, I'm, David Consulting, or whatever you are.
Let's go.
And then there is a place on your tax return. So, if you made, $50,000 this year, it goes on what's called your Schedule C, which is miscellaneous income and expenses for business. And so if you made $50,000, but you spent $10,000 in expenses, that goes there and you have a $40,000 taxable income.
Very good.
So no real filing for that. As an LLC, it is actually a legal entity in New Jersey called Limited Liability Corporation. There is a formation that goes on. You can do it on your own through the New Jersey Treasury website. I have an upcoming slide that has the link that you'll need to look at. There is what's called personal liability that's limited, and I'll tell you how it was explained to me. Let's say your company, the ABC company, has engaged with the XYZ client to do some work, and you're an accountant. And among your filing, you made a tax mistake, and now the company is on the responsibility for, let's say, $50,000 in back taxes. And the company says, well, it was your fault, Mr. or Mrs. Consultant. You have to pay that. So you're thinking, great, I've got limited liability. Yes and no. So this is America. Welcome to America, where you can get sued by anybody for anything, or you can sue anybody for anything. So the company is likely going to sue two entities in this case. They're going to sue your company. And they're going to say, company, you owe us $50,000. Like in my case, my company, I don't think is worth $50,000. I've got a, $4,000 in computer. I've got a desk. I've got a printer. I've got about $2,000, $3,000 in the bank. I don't have $50,000. So they can take the $10,000 or $20,000 of value of my company. And so there's the limit. It's limited to the value of the company. But then there's the second party that they're going to sue. They're going to sue the worker. So they're going to sue the company, and then they're going to sue the worker. If you are the worker in your company, they can sue you privately, personally as well. So just be aware that personal liability may not strictly be limited, but you will need to speak with your own business law attorney and tax professional about that. And we're going to talk more about errors and omissions insurance in a few minutes. But again, from a tax perspective, it is pass-through income on your personal income tax. So again, if you earned $50,000 on a contract and you had $10,000 in assorted expenses, maybe you bought a new laptop computer and some other things for work, those are deductions, and your tax liability were based on $40,000 of income.
Thank you.
And then there's different types of corp. There's C corp, there's S corp, there's others. A lot of them are tax differences. I'm just not going to get into it, but we'll just talk about corp in general. This is one that's very common. Basically, at the end of your company name, you have the word Inc, I-N-C. That's kind of the difference. There's also what's called articles of incorporation and bylaws. It is a legal entity formed in the state of New Jersey, many different states. It does have a similar type of limited liability, which means your company will have liability and maybe the workers on the contract will as well. But your income tax is taxed differently. In a C corp, you as an individual, the company's income is taxed. So let's say the company makes $150,000 this year. So they file a corporate income tax and they declare the $150,000. Let's assume that's $150,000 after expenses. Part of their expenses were that they paid you a salary. So they paid you a salary of $100,000. So you're paying personal income tax through your regular tax return of $100,000. So that's kind of the personal tax. Is it truly double taxation? We'll talk to your accountant because your salary is a tax deduction against the corporation, but there are two tax returns, certainly. There are certain advantages to forming a C corp, and again, you'll want to talk to your tax professional. If you're earning a lot of income from the corporation or from your work, it may make sense to switch or upgrade from an LLC to a C corp, and here's why. Let's say there's a large amount of income, maybe $250,000, $300,000 that you're bringing in this year, and that's taxed at the corporate level. Pay yourself a salary. You have to pay a reasonable salary. You can't pay yourself $1 a year. But if someone like you might be paid $100,000, pay yourself the $100,000 and pay the income tax on the $100,000. Now remember what I talked about early. The company and you have to pay your employment tax of 15.3%. So that $100,000 is subject to the employment tax of 15.3%. Now there's $150,000 left over. You earned $250,000 for the company. You paid yourself $100,000. There's $150,000 left over. At the end of the year, pay yourself a dividend, maybe up to the $150,000. But let's say you pay yourself a dividend of another $50,000. That's not salary. That's ownership dividend. It is subject to income tax, but is not subject to the 15.3% employment tax. So you can save yourself 15.3% in taxes, payroll taxes, by paying part of your compensation as a dividend or some other form of compensation other than salary. So it may make sense at some point to speak to your tax professional to see what's the best form of business entity for you. So again, that's how it was explained to me, and I'm just explaining it to you.
Thank you.
Yep. And yes, it is complicated. That's why.
And that's why you want someone that knows the law and the taxes to explain it to you.
That's why it says consult your legal and tax professional. Good. Well, now in New Jersey, to start and operate and grow your business, go to business.nj.gov. That's the very first website to go to on the state of New Jersey. They have a lot of great information and direction and guidance to help you start a business. They have a startup guide, a starter kit. They've got a lot of resources, other links within the state and outside. They have FAQ pages. So this is a good place to get started, even if you haven't yet spoken to a tax or legal professional on your own.
So
And
can you take an LLC and convert it to a C Corp?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to know.
So I don't know what the process is. I've never done it myself. It's certainly allowable at some point as your business grows or changes. And you may also need to make the decision, do I want to form my corp in another state? Some people say, should I form my corporation in Delaware or Nevada?
Okay.
Low tax states. So that's a tax question for a tax professional. In general, it is legal to do. I can't say if it's right or wrong for you. An LLC, it may or may not make sense to do that in another state. And the reason why is the income is personal income anyway, not corporate income. So you don't really take advantage of that. And I don't really know what the implication is of needing to file a personal income tax return in another state where you don't live. So again, you'll have to talk to a tax professional about that. But certainly it is more of a consideration when you form your corporation. You may want to do that in another state if it makes sense to do so. And again, this is a live link. So when you download the slides, you can see it will pop up. So if you're not good at typing, just good at clicking, this slide will work for you. So how much should I charge? So if you're an
No, that was a question in the chat. Pay attention, guys.
I told you it was coming. Yeah, this slide deck I did as much as possible. Remember that
Yes.
commercial for the ragu sauce? It's in there.
It's in there. There you go. I love that.
So tried to put as much as in there. And I've given this presentation many times over years, and as I've gotten some good questions, I've added them as bullet points as slides. So you now are seeing a much more mature version of this slide deck than when I first started it years ago. You need to charge market rate. That's what you need to charge. And the market rate is basically what a typical customer would pay for your type of consulting service. I cannot tell you at all what you should charge. So if someone says, I'm an accountant, what should I charge? I don't know. I've never looked into what accountants should be charging. You'll have to figure that out on your own. But there's some ways you can begin to figure this out and what's appropriate. If a consultant like you in your profession with your experience receives typically $100 an hour, then the market rate is probably somewhere between like 75 to 125. Now that's not a hard and fast rule. Maybe it's really between 80 and 140, but you're in a range. More experienced persons might get more. Higher level executives may get more. Less experienced may get less. Market rate also is dependent on where the project is, where you're living. The Northeast tends to be a little bit more expensive than the Southeast. So someone may be like you getting paid $100 an hour in the Northeast, maybe getting paid $80 an hour in the Southeast. So you have to make sure you understand what the market rate is. To get a rough idea, you can kind of figure out what you need. So look at your last annual salary. Divide it by 52 weeks. Now you know how much you should be paid for the week, and then divide it by 40 hours or 37.5 or whatever is typical in your industry. And now you know what you used to get paid on an hourly basis. Then consider your other costs. What do your benefits cost? Your admin time, how many extra hours are you putting in that you want to get paid for? How much PTO? So I want to take 2 hours off. Not necessarily that they should be paying for your hotel and airfare, but what these other things, what your other insurance costs and carries are going to be. And then you divide those into an hourly rate as well. And that will give you what your hourly need is. It may not be exactly market rate. The market may command more or less, but now you'll know what your need is going to be. Here's a website that will help you identify how much you could be charging for consulting. So it's a website called Founder, and they actually have this webpage, how much to charge for consulting. So they'll go into this in much more detail. And again, once you download the slide deck, you can click on it, do a screenshot right now to save it. If you can type or write really fast, you're welcome to. But again, this is a live link. You see if I hover over it. And so you'll be able to click on that and look more deeply a little later. But this is how you should begin thinking about what you should charge. Now, what about errors and omissions insurance? And errors and omissions insurance is a type of insurance that protects you from some sort of risk. So it's a type of liability insurance that protects the companies and their workers and any other professionals against claims of any kind of negligent actions. And the negligent action can be all sorts of negligence. It could be that as you walk through the corridor, you knocked over something and broke it, and they want to be reimbursed. Or maybe something about your work caused the company or the client to have incur some sort of expense or penalty, and they want you to reimburse them for your mistake. So it is that type of insurance. So as I mentioned before, who gets sued in America? Everybody involved, the company and the workers. So the freedoms that we have in our country also do mean that the companies can be protected, or anyone who has been wronged can be protected. So just because you work for a company doesn't mean you necessarily can't be sued. So do I need any kind of errors and omissions insurance? And the short answer is it depends. It depends on what your level of involvement of risk is going to be, what your tolerance is for risk, both personal and financial. So if you are working in an environment where there's a very low involvement of risk, you may decide, you know what, I'll take the chance and not get the insurance. Or maybe your insurance will cost only a little bit of money. If you won't tolerate it, if someone says, I'm suing you for $100,000 and that's going to be a problem for you, that finance, then you don't have a high tolerance for the risk. So you may want errors and omissions insurance.
I have two questions. I mean, well, a statement and a question, but the first question is, their contract employer required them to have the errors and omissions insurance policy before they would even extend an offer. So I find that very interesting. That is that preferred to have as an LLC or C Corp, or it really depends.
So the client has a right to ask that you have some level of liability insurance. And they may also say what that amount is. You know, it's very common in the home improvement contracting business. They say, I've got $1 million of insurance. And so, you know, you're then not worried that if you hired a contractor to do a bath renovation and then broke a pipe that caused flooding, they can afford to pay for it. It's the same with the work that you do. They may ask you how much you have, or they may require you. There was one client I spoke with, I turned down the project. They wanted me to have a minimum of $3 million of errors and omissions insurance. I was not willing to pay for it. It was a training company. I didn't see what the high risk was, and I did not want to invest in a high insurance policy for that. Now, what does it cost? Every industry, every type of profession has a different level of risk. So you do need to speak to your insurance agent, and they will tell you for your type of business what that cost will be.
So going back to your last slide about pay and salary and adding, you know, dividing and adding what the cost would be, somebody read that you should add 20% to your hourly rate to account for benefits. Does that sound about right? Or,
you know, at best, that's a rule of thumb. So if you don't know what it costs, you know, maybe. But, you know, the better is to do your due diligence and find out what are the professional expenses that you should be compensated for. So if your errors and omissions insurance is very expensive, you know, maybe 25%, it makes more sense. Okay. If you're providing healthcare through your company and your healthcare cost is expensive, it may be more, it may be less. We'll talk in a few minutes about health insurance also. Okay. So that makes the most sense. If you have nothing else, bump it up. I don't have an opinion if 20% is right or wrong, but I certainly would bump it up.
Thank you.
And other things to consider for errors and omissions insurance. And these are going to sound nitpicky, but they're very real world. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you say, I'm working out of my house. I work out of my home office. I've got an extra bedroom I've converted into an office. So my liability is going to be very limited. I don't need errors and omissions insurance. Let's think about a scenario. You use your personal car to drive to visit your clients at their office to have a meeting. And you have a car accident, you know, regular car accident, fender bender, on the way to or from your client. And so now you contact your insurance company and say, on my way to my client, I had this accident, please cover me. And they'll say, you used your car for work, you're not covered. You have a personal automobile policy.
Yes.
So that's something that you need to speak to your auto insurance about. Do you get a rider, an attachment to your auto insurance policy because you sometimes use it for professional service? I know on my policy, I'm allowed to use it for commuting and a certain number of miles per year and so forth. These are all, and then depending on how many miles per year, it's more or less cost. Here's another thing. Let's say as part of your job, you decided I need to upgrade my laptop computer or buy a bigger monitor. Right? I did the same thing. I upgraded to a 24-inch monitor last year. And so you use one of the online companies, excuse me, to buy the monitor, and it gets delivered a few days later by one of the shipping companies, UPS or FedEx. And the shipping person, as they walk up to your front door, trips, falls down, and he or she breaks his arm. And you are very apologetic and you say, no problems, my homeowner's insurance will cover that, because they want compensation for falling down. And you call your homeowner's insurance and you say, the professional, the shipping company fell down delivering a monitor from my business. And they'll say, homeowners doesn't cover business expenses.
Yep.
So you need a rider, or you may need a rider on your homeowners. So, look into this. Excuse me, a little frog in my throat.
So in other words, David, consult legal and insurance professionals.
Where did you hear that from?
You know what? I just came up with it.
Right.
Yes.
So, yep, that's something you want to do, right? And that's why I put this throughout the slide. I'm letting you know what I've heard, and as your friend, I'm just letting you know. But yeah, you do need to speak to the professionals. Have someone look at your homeowners, your auto, and other policies, just in case. And those are separate potentially from errors and omissions insurance as well.
And I have heard the same thing personally from having an own business. So definitely worth checking out and asking those questions. So jot the question down. And if can't take a screenshot, write it down so that you remember to ask.
Yep. Do I need to collect sales tax? To me, this was the most fun topic, and it was very absurd for me. So do I need to collect sales tax, right? You have a business, you're collecting money for service. Do I need to collect sales tax? So I went to a sales tax presentation for the state of New Jersey, and I was told, yes, only for taxable products and services. That's what I was told. So then I raised my hand and I said, what are taxable products and services? Products are taxable in New Jersey unless New Jersey says they're not. Just that simple.
He was a great speaker, so educational.
There were three people there. There was a woman from the Treasury Department, and she was very sweet and she was very helpful. But she started simple and then moved on to the detail. And then there were about a dozen of us, and I'm the only one asking questions. So either they understood everything or they were just dumbfounded. So then I asked, well, what are the products that are taxable in New Jersey? And then she directed me to the state website that has a whole list of these things of what are and are not considered taxable. So I'll give you an example. Clothing in New Jersey typically is not taxable. I'm sure you've gone to clothing stores or whatnot, bought pants, shirts, and whatnot. You don't pay sales tax on it. But and here's a funny one. White handkerchiefs. If you have a white handkerchief, it's not a taxable item. A colored handkerchief is. And I guess the thought is a colored handkerchief is going to go in a man's pocket. Go figure. Groceries. You go to the grocery store and you say, it's food, it's not taxable. Some edible items like soft drinks, candy are taxable. So some are, some aren't. And you just need to know for the service, the products that you may be selling, if it's taxable. And the flip side, services are not taxable unless New Jersey says that they are. So another example, food is not taxable. So you may say, I'm going to buy a loaf of bread, a head of lettuce, and some cold cuts, and I'll make myself a sandwich. Fine. Those foods are not taxable. However, if you go to a delicatessen and the deli man takes 2 slices of bread, a few slices of lettuce and a few slices of cold cuts and assembles them for you, that is a taxable service. And the product associated with it is taxable as well. So you just need to understand for yourself. You tend to file in New Jersey quarterly, and there's a link that you file. By the way, most professional services, so if most of us are professionals, that is not a taxable service. I only one time had to pay a sales tax for something I resold to somebody, but most are not. But I still file quarterly, and I basically put all zeros. If you have a large sales tax burden, you file monthly. I think if it's $10,000 in sales tax or more in New Jersey, otherwise it's filed quarterly, and it takes a few minutes to do. So here's where you go to get information and to get registered. Again, this is a live link as well. It is going to be in the slide deck. You can get it later. And then once you file, you get a sales tax certificate, kind of like the one that's below. And you can do with it as you please. I have not hung mine up. Mine is just in one of my folders someplace because nobody comes to my home office. Oh, another intermission. This is our last intermission, and we'll have time at the end to take questions as well. So any questions? Valerie, I was taxed.
Keep interrupting you.
What's that?
Sorry. I keep interrupting you. So I think we've answered many of the questions. The link that you did send me is not working, so I will research that at the end. But there's some wonderful suggestions in this chat box about who offers suggestions and score and how to get in touch with them. And the most recent that you just talked about, David, I've done some work outside New Jersey. Some items and services are taxed, some are not. They're taxed at different rates. So you really do need to consult with that tax attorney to figure out whether you fall into that or not.
Yeah, in my case, while I do have clients out of state, I do my work in state. So I seem to be fine that my products and services are taxed according to New Jersey state rule. I have visited my clients out of state. The only time when I worked in Chicago for 3 days, I was placed by another consulting company, so they took care of whatever that obligation was. I was subcontracted. Yep, and so here in Texas, I was taxed on all services. That's the Texas law. I have no opinion. I haven't researched. I have researched on a couple of states. I have given this presentation for a couple of groups in other states, and I do the research for that state ahead of time. I have not yet done that. I've been to Texas, but haven't done a presentation in Texas. Luxury products in several states are taxed. Yeah, and that's kind of similar. Delaware does not have a sales tax, but they do have a tax on luxury items. If you buy a car, there is a fee for buying a car. So that's one example of that. Yeah. And if you said that link didn't work, I'm going to show you later where the link is. So I'll make sure that we get that. Good.
And that will be in the thank you email.
Yep, very good.
Just look for that in a couple hours.
All right. So hopefully by now I've convinced you it's worth considering being a consultant. So how do you become a consultant? Well, if we were all in the room together, we'd all say out loud, and I'd make sure you would be saying, I am a consultant. That is all it takes to be a consultant. Yes, you can form an LLC and you can have business cards and all that, but this is really all it says. Just accept that you are a consultant. And what you're going to want to do is identify the area in which you have knowledge, experience, and where you have external support. So, if you are an accountant and you have knowledge and experience of being an accountant in the financial services sector, you may want to initially be an accountant in the financial services sector as an independent consultant. You may not have a lot of professional experience in other industries. It may be a little harder to sell yourself into that. So you'll want to make sure you identify a niche. And by support, I mean, when you worked in a company, if there was a question that you didn't know the answer, there was somebody to go talk to. maybe a coworker or your boss or somebody in another department. But when you're independent, you have to get that information on your own. So maybe there are online resources or other professionals that you'll need to have relationships with. And then research your target market. Make sure you understand what's important to the workers and the industry in which you want to work in. And so for me, I did a lot of research in the not-for-profit sector. I even volunteered for a not-for-profit company because that's the area I wanted to work. I understood that a lot of not-for-profit organizations, while they're financially sound, don't have a lot of internal IT resources. And that's the niche I wanted to work in. And so, and also small business. So I did a lot of research there. Let your professional know, your network know. Let them know I'm a consultant. Send out a tweet. Send out a post in LinkedIn. Send out an email to everybody in your email list. Get them working for you. Some of them will contact you. They may want to hear about what you're doing. Maybe they'll even consider hiring you. So that's important too. And also work with your accountant and your lawyer and anyone else, because there may be things that you need to do in your legal aspect or the way you do your accounting. Make sure that's all taken care of right from the beginning. And develop a business plan. And I'll oversimplify it and say there's two places or two ways you can create a business plan. One is you can create a very thick binder of a lot of information that talks about what your target market is like and what the saturation is and how many other competitors there are in the market and what typical rates are, what your growth strategy is and how many people you're going to hire over time and where you're going to be doing work. And it's going to be really in-depth, very well thought out and a lot of information. And then the other can just be a sheet of paper on a pad. For most of us, the sheet of paper on the pad works perfectly fine. You need that thick one if you're going to go to venture capitalists and banks asking them for money, because most people don't lend businesses money without them being comfortable or having, if you don't have equity, certainly, without them being comfortable that you know what you're doing. But I put my own business plan down on a sheet of paper and it's in a folder in my desk. It really just reminds me, if I ever stray from what I'm doing and getting a little lost, I go back to my business plan. So if I try to get into an industry that I don't have experience because I just think I'll make money and I'm not making headway, my business plan says I'm going to target small business and not-for-profit. So it reminds me, it grounds me. So just put those things down, what I'm going to charge from the beginning and different policies for myself. How do I like to invoice? I invoice monthly. So, that's the way I do it. I don't invoice weekly, I invoice monthly. So I just put those things down.
Is the business plan liquid or is it set in stone? Is it something that you revisit once a year to say that you want to stay with that, or maybe change your fees or change your path, or I have no idea.
Yeah, it's actually liquid and flexible. As you have more experience, as your business grows, you may make changes to it. It's perfectly okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. You could put your rates in there. You could put your rate strategy in there. You may say different things that are important and go revisit it. Absolutely. Okay. So now that you are a consultant, you want to name and create your company. Now, if you're going to make a legal company, you will need to name and register it in the state of New Jersey. And so I believe there's a filing fee for that, naming and registering. Certainly that's part of the LLC process, or you can reserve it ahead of time. When you name your company in New Jersey, it's the only company in that state that can be registered with the name. Now, it doesn't mean that other people can't use the name, but they can't be registered as an entity. So there is, I found another Princeton Technology Advisors, but it's not on the Treasury's website. They're not registered, they just call themselves that. I don't know how busy they are. I'm not in touch with them. Now, you also want to get a web address and register it ASAP, and I put that in all caps and bold. You can create the website later. But as soon as you register your company with the state of New Jersey, go out and register your web address right away. Don't wait weeks or months until you're ready to create a website. And here's why. The name of your company, once it's registered with the state, goes into the public record. It goes into the public record so that other people can search to see if the name is available and can they use it. And there are squatters. There are people that are legally squat. And what they do is they go and they read the registry, the state registry, and they look for newly named companies. And then they go register email addresses and they hold them for a year or two. It only costs them $10 each a year. And now what will happen if you wait? You're going to go find that your web address, your preferred web address, may be taken. It's not even being used by a website. It's probably when you go to it, you'll just see, website pending or no website developed yet, or being parked by GoDaddy or something like that. And you may be able to contact that person and say, I see you have the web address. Can I buy it? And they'll say yes. And instead of paying between $10 and $20, they may hold out for hundreds or thousands of dollars. For a company that I worked with years ago, the company changed the name and they said, get rid of the old web address. And we let it expire for the old company name. And then they decided to rebrand back to the name they moved away from. And they told me, go out and get the web address back. I was in charge of the infrastructure of IT. Somebody already got the web address and I contacted him. Long story short, he held out for $20,000 for what should have cost me between $10 and $20 to renew it. So we didn't pay the $20,000. I offered him $1,000. That was the most I offered. He turned it down.
You know what? That is such a good point. And Sam he experienced this, but you think that it only happens to little people like us, so to speak, people that are individuals. But if you look at stars, if Taylor Swift couldn't do that, she couldn't register her website because someone had already taken it, and she took her 14 before 15 was the winner. And so somebody already took it and she wasn't willing to pay 20, 30, 100 grand per different site. She wanted it for free. So it doesn't only happen to us, it happens to big name movie stars as well. And this is something you should really pay attention to if this is the direction that you plan to go.
Yeah, and if you're planning to become rich and famous, quickly go out and get a web address based on your name.
Yes.
So if you can go out and type in the web address of davidschuchman.com and my company website will come up. So
yes.
I just did it. If there are the David Schuchmans, no one else got the web address.
There you go.
Now, the other thing, if you haven't yet figured out exactly which name and you're thinking 3 or 4 different names, for $10 to $20 a year, get 3 or 4 web addresses. And then once you figure out the name of your company, let the others expire and just renew the one you want to keep. So it's not a big expense. If you have any questions in more detail about it, it is a service that I offer. I can help you do that. I can tell you I've had 2 clients come to me that hired me to help them build their website and register their web address. And their web address was taken. And so we had to come up with something else. One, I think it was like 2 words. They put a dash between it. That's what they decided to do. And by the way, my charge, if you need help acquiring a website address, my fee is a cup of coffee. Typically, it's a coffee meeting, but since it's COVID and we don't always meet in person, we'll have the cup of coffee virtually. And by the way, since I will be doing work for you, it's a large cup of coffee. So just be aware that you might have to pay the full $3. But yeah, and I do that. It's a way just to make sure that I have an opportunity to meet and sit with someone and have a good conversation. So it's a little bit of a giveaway, and I know that. Develop your professional support network. Make sure you know who it is you can call when you have questions that you can't answer. It could be other people in your industry in case an industry question comes along. It could be your accountant and lawyer and so forth. So make sure you have that. You may need licensing and certifications. Some professions do require licensing in the state. If you were doing contracting, construction contracting does require licensing. So you may need that. Not all professions do. Some you benefit from certifications. Do you need a CPA? Do you need PMP certification to be a project manager? May not be required, but it may be helpful to have. So look into that. And don't do it alone. Get the advice, and I keep mentioning the accountant, the lawyer, get your colleagues, friends in your area. Look into the small business development centers, SCORE, and other organizations that can provide you professional guidance. Locally, there's princeton.score.org, princeton.score.org. I do seminars for them. I did one last night, a great organization. There are lots of SCORE chapters. I think there's 2 or 3 of them in New Jersey. And update your LinkedIn profile. Make sure they know you're a consultant.
You know, David, let me ask you, and this isn't in the chat, but I do hear from a lot of job seekers, you know what, I'm frustrated with the job search. I think I'm going to start my own business. I will be a consultant. What chamber of commerce do you recommend I join?
I think you have to go visit the chambers of commerce that are in the area where you do business. So I'm pretty much central New Jersey. But you know, attend the meeting. They usually let you attend one for free, or you can go to the luncheon and just pay for the lunch or whatever. And see if the makeup of their membership is conducive to the client base that you're looking for. And so I found, for me, the Princeton chamber, which is a wonderfully big chamber, they had a lot of companies and people that went to the organization that weren't the people I would their employees just in doing anything and getting a free lunch. They didn't want to network with me. They didn't care. So maybe I was connecting with the wrong people. But I found small chambers with small business. The small business owners go to those themselves. So I found that's what worked for me. But you have to go and feel them out a little bit.
Thank you.
Yep. It's like joining any club.
Yes, thank you.
So ways to generate business. You're a consultant now, you're hoping to generate business. There are business groups that you can join. And so here are a couple of them. One is called BNI, and just check them out, LaTip. And they have lots of local chapters. They're not quite chambers of commerce. What these do is the business people in the group become advocates for each other. So you might be the accountant in the group, and there may be an IT person and a marketing and a couple of lawyers in different professions. They tend to have only one person of any profession or line of business, and you tend to be advocates of each other. So if I'm the IT person in the group and someone says to me, hey, do you know a good business law attorney? I would recommend the business law attorney in the group. So you build a good referral network with groups like these. And the reason why I put others, BNI and LaTip are national organizations. You know, they're fee structured. You have to decide if they're expensive or not, but there are a lot of these independent ones as well. And if you're interested, I can connect you to a couple of them in central New Jersey or Pennsylvania. Join meetup.com. Meetup.com is not the world's largest dating website. What it is, it's a virtual groups that introduce you to in-person groups. And less now because of COVID, there's less in person, but a lot of them are switching back. But the idea is you build a profile. It is completely free. Meetup.com is completely free unless you're the person who creates the group. If you create the group, you pay. You create your professional profile, put in things about you. You'll see how to set it up that talk about you professionally. You may also want to do it personally. And one thing meetup.com will do is if it finds a group in your geographic area that meets your profile, it will send you an email and say, there's a project manager group that meets in Middletown. Go, don't go, join, don't join, but at least you're being alerted.
Great group, by the way, great group. Highly recommend it.
Yep. And also join and participate in LinkedIn groups. Yep. LinkedIn groups, very similar. They're groups of like-minded people. So join professional-oriented groups and join personal groups. You know, if you're professionally an accountant, but personally you like dogs, join a group of dog owners. You never know who you're going to meet in that group as well. You'll have something in common to talk about.
Yes.
Attend professional associations, attend conferences, but don't only attend these based on your profession. Join the ones where your clients may be. If you're an accountant and you go to an accounting professional association, you're going to meet other accountants. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're an accountant in the medical device industry, go to medical device associations, go to medical device conferences. The reason why is you'll meet all sorts of people in your industry where you want to work in all different fields. You never know which one is going to connect you to your next client. And as I mentioned before, activate your network. Let them know that you're actively looking for business opportunities. And also be active on social media. Now, I can't tell you which is the best social media platform to be on. It depends on your audience. So if you tend to be very business oriented, it might be more LinkedIn, or a lot of businesses are promoting on YouTube. If you're going to be more consumer oriented, it might be Facebook. Might be Instagram, where you find more consumer-oriented people. So you'll have to figure out the ones where your audience will spend the most time. It'll be hard to be on lots of social media platforms at once. So start with one, and the one where your audience is the most active.
Absolutely.
Or where your competitors are very active. You want to be where your competitors are, because your clients are probably finding them there. So it came up earlier, where can I find gigs? So here's one. This is called Flex Jobs. And Flex Jobs is a website that includes part-time and freelance and remote jobs. I think they have a 30-day trial, but it's an annual membership.
Yes.
And so there are people that are posting and there are people that are searching. Okay. And again, this is an active link, flexjobs.com.
Just so everyone knows and is aware, Flex Jobs is legit. It's a real site, and people find real job opportunities, gigs, consulting, contract, whatever it happens to be. So yes, there is a cost. You have to weigh the free versus cost. However, know that it is valid. So check it out and just see if it works for you.
And a good chance that if you are an independent business, that $59.99 is a tax deduction.
Yes, there you go.
So if I was using Flex Jobs, I haven't used them, but if I had the $60 subscription, I would be deducting that from my business as business expense against my income, because I'm using it as a means to earn income. Freelancer, another website. They also promote remote jobs that are offered as contracts or hourly gigs. So you can check them out. Another one, Solid Gigs. They match you. Now this tends to be premium sources. So, these tend to be the kind of the creme of the crop type of opportunities. I don't remember if they have a fee or not. You'll have to take a look at it, but go to Solid Gigs and take a look. And then, of course, the regular job boards, whether it's Monster, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, any of those. Go take a look. The companies more and more are using those for contract projects as well. What if I need health insurance? So if you're in a personal relationship, a marriage, or with a partner, and you have health insurance through your partner or spouse, that's fine. You may not need health insurance. But if you do need health insurance, or if you're the provider, it's what obviously pays for any sort of medical, surgical, or other healthcare expenses. You will need to go out and look for different ways to get health insurance. If you're self-employed, you can actually just call up an insurance company and say, hey, can you sell me insurance? This tends to be expensive, but you may also get the most robust options. You can customize the insurance to exactly the way you want and need. You can cover your family members and such, so all that becomes available. There are group plans that are available through professional associations. A group plan is typically what your former employer had, where they said, we're going to cover all our employees, and they get a discount. So through the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, every state has some form of business and industry association. The New Jersey Business and Industry Association is the largest among the 50 states because we're a very populated state. You, as a member of NJBIA, which membership costs about $325, $350 a year, you get lots of discounts available, including you can buy health insurance through their group plan, or any professional associations, see if they offer that as well. Go to the healthcare exchange. If you're in New Jersey, the healthcare exchange, which is also called the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, is actually called Get Covered NJ. Some states have their own website for the exchange. If you're connecting on this call with me and you're in a state that does not have their own healthcare exchange, then you just use the national exchange, healthcare.gov. There are usually a few different companies that offer insurance through the exchange. They offer different plans that are available. You may have heard of gold, silver, and bronze. Some have higher premiums but lower deductibles, and some do the reverse. You can figure out what makes sense for you. If you're 65 or older, you can be on Medicare. And there are also the supplemental plans. You've probably seen some of those commercials for those Medicare Advantage and supplement plans. So you're available to do that. So Medicare is available. And also be aware, if you are 65 or older, but you have members and people in your house that are not 65 yet, they're younger than 65, they are not eligible for Medicare. Medicare is per person. So you cannot cover anyone else on your Medicare. Everyone covers themselves on Medicare with the supplement. So you may need one of the others. If you're recently unemployed, you may be able to get COBRA, and which basically is you're buying your employer's health insurance, available health insurance, but you're paying for it on your own. In some cases, COBRA as an expense is a business tax deduction. In some cases, it's not. It all depends on the plan. So you do have to find out from your former employer and speak to your accountant about that as well. So as we wrap up, home stretch. Consulting, it's an alternative for some of us to permanent employment, where instead of being a full-time W-2 employee, you are independent as a consultant. Of course, you can be a consultant hired by a consulting company as well. And there are pros and cons, but some of the pros, it will fill a gap on your resume. You can improve the variety of the experience, make your resume more robust, and you may get paid even more. You'll certainly get paid, but you may get paid even more. So you've got cash coming in and you fill the gap on your resume. You don't need to become an LLC or a company, but you can. We talked about some of the alternatives. And all you need to do is declare, I am a consultant.
I am a consultant.
Okay, so Christine is now a consultant.
Yay!
And I would be splashing you with holy water and blessing you accordingly.
Where should I put my shingle? Yes, I'm open for business.
Yep, hang it outside your door. Yep. So here's the slide deck. And I did send a link to Christine. Apparently it's a broken link. I'll send another one to her at the end. If you go to my website, princetontechadvisors.com, princetontechadvisors.com, that's my company. Click on the workshop tab, and then at the bottom, recently offered programs. You'll go to the web page that has all of my slide decks. I always offer all of my slide decks. If you go back to prior years, you'll see prior versions that are a little less robust than this one. If you want to download the old ones, you're welcome to. So download any of them that you want. This is a free service, so I always give the slides away. So this is where you can find that. And good. So I'll leave this slide up. Any other questions? This is a good time to ask them. And also, I'll tell you what, I'll skip ahead. Here is my contact information as well. So feel free to, if you've got a question or two about what we talked about, I'll be happy to answer them. If you've got tech questions, want to talk about that for your business as well, happy to answer those as well. Don't be surprised if you ask me some questions and I say you have to speak to your accountant or insurance professional or so-and-so. But any other questions?
I am not seeing any questions.
Don put a shingle on a roof. Very good.
Some people put their shingle out, keeps the rain out of the house, they said.
Put it next to your skylight so you can see all the possibilities.
That's about it. I mean, I think that we covered pretty much everything, and you've stayed late, so I do appreciate that greatly, just to get through the information. And you had so much to share with our audience, and they were very vocal, asking questions in our chat box. And I know I interrupted you a few times as well, just to clarify some stuff. You know,
no worries. Yeah, I kept it going. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, and Sam does have a question. What have you heard about the rates charged through sites like FlexJobs? I know Upwork has lots of opportunities, but they generally at super low rate. I don't have anything more specific than that. Of course, if it's a very low rate or a rate that you don't agree, don't accept it. It may be possible that you can negotiate. I haven't experienced that. With my clients, what I do, and this is just what I've done, is I do give my not-for-profit clients, when they're a registered 501c3, a bit of a discount, a 25% discount, just what I choose to do.
I have heard the exact same thing, David, and FlexJobs much more reliable for higher paid work than the Upwork or the Fiverr or that kind of thing. They're more lower paid.
Yeah. And I can tell you, when I first started, my rates were very low. My very first rate was actually $37.50. I calculated I needed $75 an hour minimum. And I said, you know what, I'll start at 50%. And I still have one of my clients who contracted me at that time. And I've had this weird thing. I don't raise my rates to existing clients. I raise my rates to new clients. So I'm very appreciative that they stick with me. And then the contract is still active. So I've got one client who still pays me on an hourly basis, $37.50 an hour, and I'm very appreciative that they stuck with me.
Lynn asked, I see you're using a UPS store as your business address. Are there pitfalls to using a personal address for your business?
So my legal business address is my house, but I represent to my clients a mailing address, and I do use a UPS store. And I did it for a couple of reasons. One is I wanted a Princeton street address, and I actually live in West Windsor, the town next to it. And so calling myself Princeton, and you know, Princeton has this kind of glow around it. I must be much smarter because I'm in Princeton, who knows? I can tell you there are a lot of businesses in Princeton that are not in Princeton. So I use the UPS store for that. You can use a post office PO box, and post offices do offer a street address as well. So the Princeton post office, which is actually itself not in Princeton, it's in the Carnegie Center in West Windsor, and it has a street address of Carnegie Center. So you can do that. One reason why I stuck with it is when I walked into the UPS store, I said, I want a very low box number. I want a box number that sounds like it could be a suite number. And it just so happened, right place at the right time, I got box number 100. So it sounds like I'm at 174 Nassau Street, suite number 100. I've got an office that takes up the whole first floor. So yeah, it creates an illusion. My friend has box 301, so he's got the corner office overlooking Nassau Street. Go figure.
Very impressive. All right. Good to keep in mind, because that's something that many of us would not consider as we are trying to keep all the other ducks in a row. So it's good to be able to share that information. People that have been through it or growing through it or looking to make a few changes. So I like that.
Yeah, and if you're concerned about, you know, business people coming to your home, some people don't publish your home address. Use a business address. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it doesn't look like there's anything else there. So terrific. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for Christine. Appreciate the opportunity as always.
I appreciate you taking the time to present to us and just share this information, because it is weighing on a lot of people's minds, and for them to be able to re-watch it in case they missed some part of it, that's awesome too. So thank you so much.
Very welcome. My pleasure.
All right. Very good. Have a wonderful day, and make sure you have your snow shovels to the front of your porch or garage. Get ready for this weekend.
Yeah, get ready for the 35 inches.
Yes. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.